Okay, thank you so much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would please like to be made aware if I'm heard, if the audience can hear me. I'm really grateful, first and foremost, to the ancient of days, the one who created and founded me and brought me from the lowest ebbs of life to be able to make this presentation today. I do not count myself worthy of this privilege because it's been a long time coming, but as you would come to realize, my presentation is centered around what gave me, amongst other things, the tickets to being able to do this today. I want to say a very big thank you to the Chancellor of the Covenant University, Bishop David Oyedepo. I want to thank all the team members, the organizing team members, and all the officials of the Covenant University who have made this very, very possible. And of course, the invitation extended to me. I'm grateful for the privilege. I will be talking this morning on democratizing education for the Africa that we want. And I would just love you to please give me a moment to come up with my presentation. Morning, very briefly, I would, like I said, be talking about democratizing education for the Africa that we want. And in the words of the legend of leadership in Africa, our great late father Nelson Mandela from South Africa, he said education is the key to which you can liberate any people, paraphrased. And so if we're going to be talking about Africa, taking Africa from where it is to becoming an entity to be reckoned with among nations, then it's high time we paid serious attention to education. And I'm not just talking about education as we know it, right here in Africa or at home in Nigeria. I'm talking about education as where the world is right now, and then what we need to do to be able to get there. Going right on to my presentation. For many of us who are hearing about the word democratization, what comes to mind is politics. And we think it's about, electing people. It's about, having leaders, governors in spheres of leadership where, we go to the polls and we vote and we get people announced as this or as that. But way beyond that, democracy is a very, very wide word, very, very broadened word that helps us to understand how people and processes, can, reach out to very many people across spheres, across backgrounds, across ethnicities, and even across localities. Democratization is defined as the process, in which individuals and countries and areas are able to access specific services, specific privileges and opportunities, and at the same time enhancing, social influence and enhancing planning and enhancing practice of, various values that we want people to be able to imbibe and to be able to enjoy. It's also important to know that UNESCO has already given that information way before now, that if we really want to be able to encourage and promote education, there has to be, the move against discrimination, the fight against illiteracy, unification and spread of compulsory primary and secondary education. And that is also very important because the UNESCO has been able to provide some set principles and models that can help all countries of the world, particularly third world nations, to be able to understand how they can bring their people to be at par with other people around the world. And it's important that third world countries, and particularly our continent of Africa, comes up to date, and then we are up to speed with implementing these principles. Public education is by definition dependent upon government authority to act as a public institution. And that is where, we got it wrong for so many years, believing that, of course, providing these social amenities and services should be the import and the work of government. But beyond that, private individuals and organizations also owe their people and then, their constituency the right and then the opportunity to provide them with very, very important services and, opportunities that education, of course, presents. Social progress being based on an efficient education system and greater efficiency being linked to democratization, immediate steps must be taken to democratize education at all levels. And with steps being taken to do this, we will find out that there will be interaction of very important interrelated components. And one of these is, number one, the democratization of the forms of educational activity and the content of education. And then number two, the humanization of the functioning of education institution and then extracurricular activities. And then number three, the democratization of the interactions of education with other spheres of life. And then finally, educational administrators and the passage of a new comprehensive law, and of course other supportive policies that can help promote education. I quickly want to, because of the poverty of time, run through some of the very important components of my presentation. If you take a look at the federal government of Nigeria as a case study, bringing it down home, really, really home, because Nigeria is the most populous nation in Africa, and so we need to be able to talk from the epicenter of population. And if you look at what is happening here, you will see that between 1994 and 2014, these are the budgetary allocation to education in Nigeria. And as against the UNESCO's, principle of at least voting 26% of the nation's allocation of resources to education, the best we've ever had, in this number of years is been 12.83. And then look at what we had in 2009, right down to 8.79. And then if you look at the bulk of what money has been spent on, in government, you would realize that it hasn't gotten us anywhere because we've forsaken the foundations, the fundamentals of education. And that's one wrong notion about people have about education. We believe that, having certificates and then completing programs just gives us that, access to be able to earn meal tickets, gives us the opportunity to be able to make money. But beyond that, education gives us an opportunity to be able to negotiate where we stand with, other contemporaries around the world. I remember when in 2015, I got the opportunity to be able to visit, the renowned Howard University, in the U.S. And I saw firsthand how, in other parts of the world, take education, how they value education, how much they invest in education, and how it has opened, them to varying degrees of advancement. And, we keep wondering, why is Africa behind? Why are we behind in this part of the world? It's simply because we've forgotten that for us to be able to liberate our people, to liberate our economy, to liberate our society, we need to also liberate people from illiteracy. And we should stop seeing education as a privilege. Education is a right. It's a right of the people. And until we understand that, and until governments and private individuals and institutions understand that, we'll keep failing for as long as it takes, until we come to realize that it's not just enough to build schools, it's not just enough to build universities, but to ensure that the standards of these schools and institutions are up to par, with what is obtainable in other parts of the world. Then we'll realize that there will be nothing that would be happening. And so it's very important that people, who have access to making policies and influence, people who have the opportunity to be able to make laws and regulations and legislation, are able to influence, government to come up with principles, to come up with, with terms, to come up with policies that will engender, creation of democratized education from the primary, level up to the tertiary institution. And if you realize what's going on in other parts of the world, you will see, that, young people, youngsters, young people, kids, children in advanced nations of the world are exposed to certain levels of education that enables them to be creative, that enables them to expand their, their mindset, enables them to expand, their abilities to be able to create things. And what you find is that you find people at 10, you find kids, children at 12, at 15, coming up with inventions, with creative ideas that are becoming global house names. At the point in time, just a few years ago, a youngster of just 14 in Russia created a game that became the world's most played game. That's because they're not just exposed to learning the alphabet, just exposed to going to schools and then taking notes down. They are exposed to the nitty-gritty of advanced education that surrounds technology and and robotics and digital content that enables them to be able to be creative, enables them to be able to work so much and then produce so much at very, very young ages. And it's important that we bring this home to the continent of Africa and help our people to be able to be at par, you know, with their contemporaries around the world. It's also important to note that, you know, all over the world, education is advancing, education is changing. And if we don't, you know, move along with the tide, we will definitely be found wanting, and a lot of things would, you know, would not be going as, you know, as expected, you know, by our people. Just give me a moment. I'm trying to move my slide. Okay. And so the question is, why should Africa embrace democratization in education? Like I said earlier, in the broader sense of the word, it is the application of democratic principles and the process of transitioning into a system based on such principles. Education has predictable effects. It has, you know, far-reaching effects on individual income and cognitive abilities, increases in education. It's also associated with favorable social incomes. And hence, poverty level of a nation can be seen to nosedive as the people get the right kind of education and quality education. It's very important that we know this. Now, what are my recommendations, you know, for Africa, you know, that we want, and then how we can get there? First and foremost, government, through its education management policies and agencies, should embark on proper planning that will involve forecasting and then estimating the financial, human, and material resources, you know, that will ensure that we're able to drive education in the direction I want it to go. And then the respective African governments, you know, from North Africa to South Africa to Western Africa, and of course Eastern Africa and Central Africa, should improve its funding of the education sector. We should abide by the 26% recommended by the UNESCO for starters, you know, and then drive that, you know, into implementation and not just having it on paper. Then entrepreneurial education. As I listened to the Chancellor this morning talk about exposing, you know, the undergraduates in Covenant University to entrepreneurial education, I mean, it gives me joy to understand that at least we have a pace setter in that sector in this country. Just beyond having it on paper, we have people who are practicing it. And so that should be given more attention in our educational system. It will help produce self-reliant and independent citizens. And of course, there should be a regulation of the establishment of private institutions to make sure that only schools that are up to at least the minimum standards are approved. It's not just enough to have individuals, you know, founding institutions, but then the question is, who is maintaining and regulating the standards so that we don't have a repeat of what government has been trying to work on for many years. We believe the private sector should set the pace, and so that sector also needs to be seriously monitored for efficiency and effectiveness. Education should be made available and affordable for all and sundry by the government, and that is the crux of my presentation this morning. Education should be made available for all and sundry by the government. I want to say thank you so much for the organizers' invitation to me. I want to say thank you for making it possible for me to participate in this year's presentation. And I hope that everyone who has listened in this afternoon and who is also joining the conversation from anywhere will be able to come up with the organizers to form a policy framework that will help us to build the kind of Africa that we want, giving cognizance to education, quality education, and helping to strengthen our democracy and corporate governance. Thank you so much for the opportunity.